I'm Richard Ashworth. I'm here to talk to you about hexagram number 2 from the Book of Changes, Kun, sometimes called Earth, often described as the Receptive. The idea of these little films is that I will talk about how you might learn from, make use of a hexagram if you cast it or come across it by some other means, but also how it may tell us about what's going on in the world and what to do about it. Now, Kun is all yin. So there's 6 yin lines. So it is a totally open thing. It's like a hole in the ground awaiting a seed. It is a blank page. You might also say it is a clearing in the forest. You might also say it is open space where there have been buildings. Kun is reckoned to be overseeing the Tao of humanity, which is how we behave towards each other, and therefore hexagrams 30 to 34, where Qian, the first hexagram, number 1, heaven, the Father, is reckoned to be overseeing the Tao of heaven, which is more philosophical, spiritual, and so on, and concerns the first 30 hexagrams. And you might think that's unbalanced, but actually, in terms of yin and yang lines, they are exactly even, and they're even in other ways as well. So technically, there are 6 yin lines. There is no what's called correspondence. In other words, there is no yin and yang to cooperate because there's no yang, and what's called coupling when the lines that are adjacent are yin and yang doesn't happen either. The host or ruler is the second line. The host or ruler is reckoned to be the best or most typical line. In this case, it's the second because it is a yin line which is correctly placed, because yin lines should appear in even numbered locations. It's the second line, but it is not firm. So it is correct but not firm. This is kind of delicate. It is on the edge of changing, of course. Kun changes to several different hexagrams depending on which line we're dealing with, and they will change in a particular order. The bottom line will change first, but we'll come to that. The ideograph is the earth plus a line through a field, sometimes interpreted as being lightning, so about a sudden turnover, because we've come to the extreme of yin, and we'll come to that when we look at what is sometimes thought of as being the 7th line of yin, of kun. There is no what's called a nuclear. In other words, there is no way of looking at this hexagram and seeing where it's come from. It comes from itself. It is self-derived. If you do some formula involving all of its lines, they're all yin, so you keep coming to all yin. And as Confucius says, when yang is without yin, it is too firm. And when yin is without yang, it leaves a legacy of trouble. A legacy of trouble. So the text, the first line, Yuan Heng Li Pinma Chi Chun. I'm afraid I don't speak tonal languages, forgive me. Yuan Heng Li Chen is an invocation which appears many times in the Book of Changes, and that invocation appears in the same place in the text for Qian, except missing that bit, Pinma, which means a mare. So it's saying the origin, a sacrificial offering, profitable divination, which is something like to the north, to the south, to the east, to the west, to God, to heaven, to earth, and so on, that kind of thing. But this interpolates Pinma, which means a mare. So the difference between this and the corresponding line in Qian is that it's about being open and receptive. It is, the mare is open to the stallion, is the idea. Whatever we 21st century thinkers might think of that, that's what that means. So the lesson here is following obtains mastery. If first confusion, following obtains mastery, the superior man has a place to go. So it is saying that there's this contrast, I think, between the superior man who has a place to go, that is someone who is directed, and the following obtains mastery, that is someone who is compliant with someone else's agenda, which may lead to confusion. And what's suggesting is there is no contrast between those things. The idea is to be directed, but also in keeping perhaps with principles, keeping principles but remaining directed, or being assertive but also within some kind of a code. And if we want to live a life that is useful and productive and not wasteful, we try to follow that middle path, which is what this is about. And the final line in the Gua text, the text of the whole hexagram, is Chunchi, the divination good fortune. The first line is about walking on hoarfrost and waiting for it to be, which is kind of like sleet, I think, and waiting for solid ground to appear. The point being that if we follow these instructions, it may be, it may feel confusing, but in time, firm ground will appear. Starts perilous, but shifting ground gives way to the firm. So it's a warning against the first signs of diversion. It's a warning against looking back, looking over your shoulder, being sure you're in the right place, and veering in one direction or the other, too fast or too slow, and looking down. You know, the metaphor maybe of being on a tightrope and looking down, the tightrope being the perfect occupation, and looking down being a very dangerous thing to do. So that's the first line. Second line, straight, square, great, without effort, nothing is not advantageous. That double negative is a little bit demanding. I take this to mean that we want to have things done through us and for us rather than by us, and that efforting is pushing on a door with a the handle on the outside, or vice versa. This is about allowing and trusting. It's not about not putting effort in, because the Tao is not necessarily, the middle path is not necessarily the open door, not necessarily not the closed door, not necessarily the downward slope, not necessarily not the upward slope, but we can feel it. And it's not about forcing things, which would be too yang, but it's also not about abrogating responsibility, which perhaps would be too yin. And this line is perhaps correct but fragile. That's the second line. The third line, Hang Chang Ke Chun, Go Kong Wang Shi Wu Chang Yu Chang, holding back excellence in the divination, perhaps following the king's business, which is the kicker here, I think. No achievement has an end. So this is perhaps talking about avoiding false modesty as much as avoiding pride. And in fact, avoiding is a misleading, a bit of a red herring, because what we want to do is to be humble and also to be appropriately respectful both of ourselves and of other people. And we don't get lost when outward events confuse us. We don't fall into the trap of thinking that what's going out there means that we need to change what we know to be appropriate here. The fourth line, Guo Nang Wuju Wu Yu, a tied up sack, no blame, no praise. Tied up sack is sometimes thought of as a metaphor for a man who will not listen. Sometimes the tied up sack is considered to be the scrotum with testicles, and it's as if a man is so willful that he has rights because he is a man, or because he is strong, or because he is powerful, that he will take actions for the wrong reasons. But the particular thing here, that kind of character would be someone who would be doing ultimately things for approval, to look powerful, clever, or whatever. Action for the right reasons, not for approval, is one way of translating that. To not do things for praise or to avoid blame. It is not about votes. The fifth line is about yellow undergarments or yellow underwear. Traditionally, a scholar would have yellow undergarments, which would not be visible, but they'd be part of the uniform of a scholar. Qian represents outer garments, Kun lower garments, and the yellow is about the middle path, because earth in most of the sequences of stems and branches and others in Chinese metaphysics is in the middle. In the sequence of stems, for instance, of course, the earth stems are right in the middle of the sequence of 10. If you know what stems and branches are, if you don't, you might want to investigate that. It's about following a leader because he has integrity, and not necessarily because he is showing off his integrity. It will, like his undergarments, it will not be visible. The sixth line, dragons fight in the wilderness, their blood is black and yellow. Well, this is about silly kind of chest-beating contests between political views, religious views, other kinds of views. But what lies underneath this is hypocrisy, expecting deference without offering it. We are respected in the degree to which we respect, and especially in a wood dragon year, which this year is about to be. It's about being respectful and respecting other people's egos. That's what dragons need to do. There was a funny story on a workshop that I was on a long time ago, which was working from the principles of Course in Miracles, which is a wonderful and heavy book about this thick. The principles are essentially these ones we're talking about, and about two people arguing about who was the most evolved, and ending up with one of them throwing the book of Course in Miracles at the other. And it is quite a weighty tome, and that was, clearly not appropriate. So expecting deference without offering it, this is not a competition. It's all over in one sense and there's nowhere to go, but it's not a competition. If all 6 lines are changed, we have in effect a 7th line. And it says, Li Yong Chun Yu, advantageous always to be firm. If you are able to follow the Tao constantly, life is perfected. I.e., yin follows yang and vice versa. And I'm tempted to quote the philosopher Seal, as in the rock star Seal, who said that technique is only there to prevent the body from interfering with the soul's free expression. Technique is only there to prevent the body from interfering with the soul's free expression. Let us now look at how the lines change into other hexagrams, because when you change a line of the hexagram, you get another hexagram. And in this case, we have 6 yin lines, as we do in Kun, a clean sheet, but also lots of opportunities to go what we might call right, and opportunities to go what we might call wrong. So the first line, we change the first line, we get hexagram 24, that is Fu, the return, which is coming back, which may mean repetition. It may mean a fresh start. Either of those things are possible. If we're looking at this changing line in terms of the time in this month of December, this wood rat, it happens on the 7th of December, starting all over again. This could be a process of forgiveness, but it could be a process of doubling down with the various cruelties abroad at this point. One hopes it's a fresh start. The second line, which would change on the 12th of December, following this particular way of breaking up the hexagram, would be a change to hexagram 7, Shi, the army. And Anoraks, Book of Changes Anoraks, will notice that all of these changes, they fall into 3 pairs of consecutive hexagrams. And King Wen, when he put these in order, many people would say they're in a random order. It doesn't seem to me they're in a random order at all. Certainly the pairs are not random, but I see progress in the sequence of the hexagrams. Obviously, the fact that the lines balance, as I said at the beginning, bears that out. But there is a great deal of art simply in the order of these. This is a fantastic achievement. I mean, almost like the invention of the wheel. King Wen putting these in a particular order. He was someone who knew something. Anyway, line 2 is about scorched earth. Changes to Shi, the army, which is earth over water, muddying the water, scorching the earth. wasting, enthusiasm, wasting resources. It is the opposite to union. So this hexagram 7, the other, its counterpart, its couple, if you like, is number 8, which is B, which is union. Line 3, we change the third line, so we have yin, yin, yang now. It becomes hexagram 15, sometimes called teamwork, sometimes called humility. It would fall on the 17th of December, that week, 5 days of being ruled by humility would start then. It's humility, real or false. One of my notes is it's about compromise diplomacy, if you wanted to apply that to events in the outside world. Diplomacy that perhaps should not be trusted, or diplomacy that is kind of empty. It's a kind of pretend reluctance or a pretend insistence that things cannot be another way. And the solstice, 12/23 on the 22nd, this particular year falls into that. Line 4 is correct but not firm. You remember it's an even number yin line, not firm, not as good as the second one, which was, of course, in the middle of the bottom trigram and therefore central, the middle path. Line 4 is about rights, it's about release. The hexagram it changes to you. If you change that line, it's hexagram 16. Yi, sometimes called free movement, which is self-explanatory in certain of the tragedies that are going on in the world at the moment. Free movement would be a very hopeful sign. The fifth line is the line of the emperor, the line of the ruler. When it changes from yin to yang, you maybe have a firm ruler. You maybe perhaps have a ruler who has integrity. The yin lines gather around the prince. Now, if we're talking about peace, it may be that peace emanates from the female principle. Peace emanates from mothers, perhaps. War perhaps ends when mothers decide they'd sooner have children than ideological victory. In many of the conflicts that are going on, they are simply about that. But the fifth line is about the leader, about leadership with integrity. And perhaps it's about change of leadership for that reason. It changes, if I didn't say this already, to hexagram 8, which is union. It's the counterpoint to she, the army. 7 leads to 8, obviously enough. About working together, and particularly about the female principle, creating unity, about creating family, if you like, about creating union of purpose. The sixth line changes the hexagram to bow stripping, which is a nasty hexagram, which we have seen already this year, which is about stripping away, cutting back until there is nothing there. Whether you're talking about doing that to a city, whether you're talking about doing that to society at large, whether you're talking about doing that to individuals, it's something that doesn't work and cannot last. Interestingly, one gloss that was put on this by my teacher, Peter Firebrace, who was a highly respected acupuncturist with whom I studied Book of Changes 20 years ago and whose notes I still consult. He talked about this line being about a court-martial or stripping of dignity. And one possible article of hope here is that it's about changing leaders who are not representing the people, which has been very much the theme of the hexagrams we've looked at since we started this series, that is hexagrams 45, 23, and this one. Bow stripping is, about perhaps getting to a point where nothing more can be stripped away. The seventh line in quotation marks, which both Kun and Shan have, is about a transformation happening organically. It changes to hexagram 1. If all the lines change, it goes from yin to yang, like that. So in summary, we have a hexagram which represents the wood rat of this month, this particular rat, or wood rat. It represents changes, rapid changes. It represents a series of, it offers a series of instructions or suggestions as to how to stay on a middle path, which will keep you sane and balanced and useful. And of some of the obvious pitfalls. And what I leave you with is this thought that most of us are trying not to feel what we feel most of the time. So most of our action is to not feel what we feel, and we think that we hurt because we're feeling something. We actually tend to hurt because we're trying not to feel something. And that appropriate behavior is generally going with what we feel like, trusting that it moves, not taking decisions to not feel that way. So this has been Kun. We will be going looking at the next hexagram early in January. I'm just looking to see what it is. I've forgotten. Oh yes, which is number 21, Shihe, biting through, and I will look forward to it. If not me seeing you, you seeing me then. So thank you for your attention. We will talk again soon when we're looking at hexagram number 21. Thank you.